working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
I'm Gina Pablo, and welcome to ASEAN in Focus.
Hello, I'm Esther Adanga, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, 4 people were reported dead and more than 100 injured in Japan on Thursday after a powerful overnight earthquake rattled large parts of the East Coast and prompted a tsunami warning.
Vietnam announced an end to quarantine for international travelers on Wednesday as it seeks to restart its tourism industry after 2 years of strict COVID-19 restrictions.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo takes a camping through the forest where the country's future capital will be built. Governors from across the country bring soil and water from their respective regions and mix them together to symbolize the country's unity. First in our news, 4 people were reported dead and more than 100 injured in Japan on Thursday after a powerful overnight earthquake rattled large parts of the East Coast and prompted a tsunami warning. Authorities said the 7.4 magnitude quake off the coast of Fukushima derailed a bullet train, opened cracks in highways, and threw products from shelves in shops. Let's watch this.
All areas in the country must be placed under alert level 1 before the government could impose a lower status of COVID-19 risk classification, a health official said Wednesday. During a palace briefing, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere said the government is looking forward to having all provinces, highly urbanized cities, and independent component cities under alert level 1. Take a look.
Unang-una, yung alert level 0 po is not a formal term and not an official term yet for the IATF and the government. Pag pinag-usapan po natin yung susunod na level pagkatapos ng alert level 1, iyan po ay pag-uusapan na hindi per area but for the country already. Ibig sabihin, ang kasunod na po ng alert level 1 ay makita natin mag-alert level 1 na ang lahat ng areas sa ating bansa. Ang rason po kung bakit hindi po tayo bumababa pa beyond alert level 1 is because may kaso pa rin naman po tayo. Hindi pa rin naman po tayo nawawala ng kaso at sa katunayan dito po sa NCR, we are still averaging about 162 cases per day dito po sa National Capital Region. So hindi pa rin po natin tinatanggal ang alert level 1.
Vergere noted that discussions on further easing of restrictions and refocusing of resources would start when all areas nationwide are under alert level 1. She said the government would review whether dedicated hospital beds for COVID-19 cases, quarantine facilities in local government units, and testing surveillance are still needed. The National Capital Region and 47 other areas have been placed under alert level 1 from March 16 to March 31.
Meanwhile, the Department of Health will apply for an amended emergency use authorization for the administration of a fourth dose of coronavirus disease or 2019 vaccine after discussion with all expert groups are finished, an official said Wednesday. Let's watch this.
No, so alam naman po natin na kapag labas po ang vaccine expert panel ng mga rekomendasyon ukol sa fourth doses o yung tinatawag na second booster para sa piling populasyon dito sa ating bansa, katulad po ng immunocompromised individuals at saka mga senior citizens. Ito po ngayon ay pinag-aaralan ng ating all experts group. Pero ang pinaka-importante po kasi ay ma-amend muna ang emergency use authority for these fourth doses. So DOH, pagkatapos po makapag-usap with the all experts group, mag-a-apply po ang DOH for an amended EUA so that we can be able to do these fourth doses. So,
earlier, VEP member Dr. Ronjen Solante said a fourth dose or second booster may not be needed for the younger population or immunocompetent. He said the third dose or first booster may be enough for them as protection against the severe type of COVID-19.
Now let's go over to Vietnam, where the country announced an end to quarantine for all international travelers on Wednesday as it seeks to restart its tourism industry after 2 years of strict COVID-19 restrictions. The only virus requirement for visitors will be a negative COVID test, according to the country's Ministry of Health in a statement. The communist state's tourism sector was worth up to $32 billion a year before the pandemic, but it ground to a standstill during the pandemic as the government restricted travel. Virus curbs have slowly been eased in recent months, with visitors trickling back in since November to play golf at resorts under a bubble arrangement. Vietnam also announced the resumption of 15 days visa-free travel for citizens from 13 countries, which includes Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Britain, Russia, Japan, South Korea, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Belarus. The country, which has a population of 97 million, is still reporting nearly 200,000 new COVID cases a day as the Omicron variant sweeps through. But the health ministry says the situation remains under control, with hospitalization and death rates staying low. Officials attribute to the high vaccination rate, with 98% of adults fully inoculated, according to the health ministry.
In another news, a senatorial candidate on Thursday urged the government to look into the condition of overseas Filipino workers in Russia amid the ongoing tensions in Ukraine. In a statement, Partido Reforma Senatorial Bet Guillermo Elizar said the government must establish a line of communication with Filipinos in the host country, which has been hit by economic sanctions from various countries. He also urged the government to check if the Filipinos in Russia want to be repatriated, noting that their safety and welfare must always be prioritized. The United States, United Kingdom, European Union, Australia, and some Asian countries condemned Russia over its invasion of Ukraine and slapped economic sanctions against it, including curbs on its oil trade, which contributed to the hike in fuel prices. The Department of Foreign Affairs has raised alert level 4 in Ukraine, which means a mandatory evacuation of all Filipinos and a ban on the deployment of Filipino workers in the conflict-torn European country.
Meanwhile, thousands of Russian tourists in Thailand are struggling to find a route home. Thai officials said Sunday as international sanctions imposed over the war in Ukraine hit holidaymakers. Russia's invasion in February provoked a host of international measures targeting businesses and banks, with some Russian carriers canceling flights and global payment firms suspending services. Russian tourists have been among the largest group of visitors to return to Thailand's beachside resorts since pandemic restrictions eased. But many now find themselves without a return ticket. Tourism Authority of Thailand official Chatan Kunjara Naayudaya said 3,100 Russians were stuck in Phuket, while just over 2,000 in Samui and smaller numbers were in Krabi, Anga, and Bangkok. While Thailand has not banned Russian flights, international airspace restrictions has seen some firms such as Russia's flagship Aeroflot canceling services, leaving tourists to seek alternative routes such as through the Middle East with different carriers. Many tourists have also been hit by Visa and MasterCard suspending operations.
Going back to Ukraine, they claimed Thursday that Russia had destroyed a theater harboring more than 8,000 of people in the besieged southern port city of Mariupol, with the toll as yet unknown. Officials posted images that appeared to show the once gleaming whitewashed three-story theater hollowed out and ablaze with bricks and scaffolding piled high. I quote, "The invaders destroyed the drama theater, a place where more than 1,000 people found refuge. We will never forgive this." End of quote, the Mariupol City Council said in a Telegram post. Days before the apparent attack, satellite images shared by private company Maxar clearly showed the words "Deti" or children in Russian etched out in the ground on either side of the building. Mariupol Mayor Vadim Boychenko called the attack a horrifying tragedy. The city is a key strategic target for Moscow, potentially linking Russian forces in Crimea to the west and the Donbas to the east and cutting off Ukrainian access to the Sea of Azov. For days, Russian forces have bombarded the city, which once had about 500,000 residents, cutting power, food, and water supplies. Ukrainian officials branded the bombing a war crime.
Meanwhile, the Polish, Czech, and Slovenian prime ministers met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev on Tuesday in the first visit by foreign leaders to Ukraine's besieged capital since Russia's invasion. The three countries have been among the most forthright in the calling for a tougher Western approach to Moscow. Let's take a look.
The European Union has to give very quickly a candidate status, and more than this, has to invite Ukraine to the European Union and all the defensive weapons to defend your homes. We will try to organize, orchestrate all over the world.
We are doing everything in our capacity to help you, to help the refugees coming from Ukraine. And we are totally aware that the most important thing is to help Ukraine with weapons, defensive and offensive, for Ukraine to be able to defend the land, the sea, and the sky.
You are fighting for your lives, for your families, for your country, for freedom. But we know you are fighting also for our lives and for our freedom.
During the visit, Poland's Vice Premier Jaroslaw Kaczynski called for the deployment of a NATO or other international peacekeeping mission that will be able to defend itself and that will operate on Ukrainian territory. Such appeals have so far received little support in the West, where there is fear such as moves could trigger a catastrophic war with nuclear-armed Russia. Instead, Western nations have opted to isolate Russia diplomatically and economically. They have introduced crippling sanctions that have pushed Russia towards a possible default on its debt and forced Moscow out of many international political and sporting forums.
More stories in connection to the Russian invasion to Ukraine. Two main players in the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee were ambushed, interviewed by our Eagle correspondent Eli Aguilar in New Jersey. Let's take a listen.
New Jersey State Senator Robert Menendez, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, stressed how important it is for the United States to go after the Russian oligarchs in an ambush interview at the Ukrainian-American event in New Jersey.
We're targeting Russian oligarchs everywhere, getting their yachts, freezing their accounts, finding every single way to cripple them economically so that the pain goes to the very top of the Russian elite, but also the type of pain that the Russian people will feel as a result of it.
This is in connection to the White House statement that the U.S. and allied countries, including the European Union, Switzerland, Canada, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand, to impose sanctions from banking and investments to freezing of assets against Russian leaders, the oligarchs, and their families.
So we have put a task force together that is comprised of Treasury, the FBI, and other federal departments that are just focused on oligarchs.
The new task force, involving interagency law enforcement officers from FBI, Marshal Service, IRS, Postal Inspection, Homeland Security Investigations, and Secret Service, will track down and pursue Russian officials, government-aligned elites, and those who aid or conceal illegal activities. The task force is using different tools, including cryptocurrency tracing, to follow those who are in violation of sanctions and hiding ill-begotten assets and wealth. Two of Russia's largest banks and its subsidiaries have been cut off from processing payments through the U.S. financial system. Senator Cory Booker also attended the Ukrainian-American event. Booker is also a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
What you see here is a united group of Ukrainian Americans who are standing for the freedom of Ukraine. And it's something that I share their commitment to, and will continue to do everything I can that we keep Ukraine free and beat back the despotism, the unprovoked, violent attack of Vladimir Putin.
Any word about taking refugees here?
We've opened the doors. We're going to work with the United States State Department. We've done it for the Afghan people, and we've got to do it now. So anything that we can do, we were the #1 state for welcoming Afghani refugees, and we will open New Jersey up with the same offer to the State Department.
Appeal to everyone. Thank you.
My appeal to everyone is to support a free Ukraine and understand that it is intrinsically tied to the safety and the security of the United States of America.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also here in New Jersey, an executive order approved by Governor Phil Murphy requiring all state agencies to suspend or revoke any business relations and financial institutions supporting the Russian government in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. New Jersey is one of the first states in America to establish such an executive order. The Russian invasion has killed nearly 100 children, and according to the United Nations, over 3 million Ukrainians have fled to different neighboring countries. From New Jersey Bureau, Ellen Aguilar for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
The impact of war between Russia and Ukraine continues to be felt around the world, even as far away as Hawaii, where there have seen an outpouring of support to Ukrainian people. Here's Alfred Asenas from BBC Hawaii Pacific with more.
We are sympathetic of our neighbors, our people in Ukraine. We're encouraging our community and people of the world to pray.
I'm here as a concerned citizen, okay? Because what's going on is just so evil. We can't just stand back and do nothing. And if even if so much as wearing Ukrainian colors and waving at people, that's doing something at least, maybe to raise consciousness.
Just a few moments, Honolulu Hale, which houses the office of the mayor and the city council, will light up with yellow and blue, representing the colors of the flag of the European country of Ukraine.
In our shared contempt for what's happened to the people of Ukraine, that Honolulu Hale will be lit in blue and yellow lights in support of the Ukrainian people. This is something that, you know, I've been on this planet since 1946, and this sort of predates my whole sense of the world, and something that sounds like it was happening in the 1930s. It's really absolutely hard to comprehend that this is going on. We can only pray for those people, and somehow, some way, through diplomacy or some other action, that this comes to an end, and comes to an end quickly.
Meanwhile, the United Kingdom sanctioned Russian lawmakers who supported Ukraine breakaways of Lugansk and Donetsk. These Duma members will be banned from traveling to or doing business in the UK and accessing assets held there. Here's Nicole Salenga, our EBC UK from EBC UK Bureau.
Britain on Friday slapped a fresh wave of sanctions in Moscow, targeting 386 members of Russia's parliament who supported President Vladimir Putin's devastating invasion of Ukraine. The new sanctions against members of Russia's Duma, the lower house of parliament, banned them from traveling to Britain, as well as accessing any assets they hold in the UK. The lawmakers were sanctioned after they voted in February to recognize the breakaway republics of Lugansk and Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, providing a pretext for the war, British Foreign Ministry said.
We are absolutely determined to sanction Russian oligarchs. We've already sanctioned over 100 individuals and organisations. We've got a further list we are working through. We have put in place the toughest package of sanctions in British history.
The move came after the government on Thursday froze the assets of Chelsea Football Club's Russian owner, Roman Abramovich, the highest profile oligarch yet sanctioned by any Western country. Abramovich, 55, was one of 7 more oligarchs slapped with new British restrictions over the invasion, including his former business partner, Oleg Deripaska. Prime Minister Boris Johnson had been accused of delaying action against wealthy Russians and turning a blind eye to Russian money that has coursed through London since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russian vessels and aircrafts are already barred from the UK. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I am Nicole Salenga. We live in interesting times.
President Joe Biden labeled Vladimir Putin a war criminal on Wednesday after watching harrowing TV footage of the invasion of Ukraine, triggering an immediate angry riposte from Russia. Let's watch this.
Oh, I think he is a war criminal.
Will you be meeting with him?
The president's remarks speak for themselves. He was speaking from his heart and speaking from what he's seen on television, which is barbaric actions by a brutal dictator through his invasion of a foreign country.
It was the first time Biden has used the phrase to describe Putin, and the U.S. president then deepened his attack, tweeting that Putin was inflicting appalling devastation and horror on Ukraine, bombing apartment buildings and maternity wards. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov told Russian news agencies that Biden's rhetorical attack was unacceptable and unforgivable on the part of the head of state, whose bombs have killed hundreds of thousands of people around the world. With the Russian advance largely stalled by Ukrainian troops, Moscow has turned increasingly to bombardments of civilians, prompting 3 million Ukrainians to become refugees. Psaki said that U.S. State Department already has a legal process that is ongoing to examine Russia's actions.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned Monday that the world must act to prevent a hurricane of hunger and meltdown of the global food system following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Secretary General told reporters in New York that the war risks sparking far-reaching consequences for the global food supply that will have a devastating impact on the poorest. Let's watch this.
This war goes far beyond Ukraine. It is also an assault on the world's most vulnerable people and countries. While war reigns over Ukraine, a sword of Damocles hangs over the global economy, especially in the developing world. Food, fuel, and fertilizer prices are skyrocketing. Supply chains are being disrupted, and the costs and delays of transportation of imported goods when available are at record levels. And all of this is hitting the poorest, the hardest, and planting the seeds for political instability and unrest around the globe. 45 African and least developed countries import at least 1/3 of their wheat from Ukraine and Russia. 18 of those countries import at least 50%. This includes countries like Burkina Faso, Egypt, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. We must do everything possible to avert a hurricane of hunger and the meltdown of the global food system. And with each passing hour, two things are increasingly clear. First, it keeps getting worse. Second, whatever the outcome, this war will have no winners, only losers.
Sidelines of a briefing by the Organizations for Security and Cooperation in Europe to the Security Council. Finally, he said, I quote, further escalation of the war, whether by accident or design, threatens all of humanity. In the last couple of weeks, Guterres said he has been in close contact with a number of countries, including China, France, Germany, India, Israel, and Turkey, working on mediation efforts to bring to end to this war. Stay tuned for more news. We'll be right back after this break.
Mr. Bawal, may ibis ka, oh. Ba't It's a prank! Okay lang manakot!
Pero kung mananakot ka para sa boto, bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, threats, intimidation, terrorism, use of fraudulent device or other forms of coercion is an election offense.
Sino kausap mo? Makaalis na nga, sa iba na lang ako mananakot. Mr. Pwede! Mr. Pwede! May malaking ipis sa likod mo! Nox! Babawi ka pa! Di mo ako maiisahan! Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang pananakot para sa boto. Ipis! Hoy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Yung mga nakakatawang tao, yan ang dahilan kung bakit marami tayong nakakatawang videos.
Sabi nga ibang girls get daw pag may dimples yung lalaki.
Ala!
Wala pa akong nakitang lalaking may dimples eh.
Ano ba yun?
Wala akong gana. Siguro walang nagsasabi sa'yo ng ituel.
That's fine, ma'am. That's fine. Expected yun ang susunod. Ito na ang ating What's Your Name?
Magwalis ka naman dito, sobrang dumi.
Mamaya, ma.
Ay, wow! Juice! Gusto mo, juice?
Pangit ng lasa, ma. Mas pangit ka! Funniest Nakaball Videos.
Welcome back. Indonesian President Joko Widodo takes a camping trip to the forest where the country's future capital will be built. Governors from across the country bring soil and water from their respective regions and mix them together to symbolize the country's unity. Take a look.
Khususnya di Jakarta. Artinya apa? Magnet ada di Pulau Jawa dan ada di Jakarta. Oleh sebab itu harus ada magnet yang lain.
Panen bukan rubuh. Rubuh dimarahin Pak.
The country is preparing to move its capital from overcrowded Jakarta to Nusantara in a mega project that has come under criticism from environmentalists who warn it could damage ecosystems in the region. Widodo announced plans to move the capital in 2019, citing rising sea levels and severe congestion on the densely populated Java Island. The move is set to begin in 2024, but Widodo has cautioned the project could take over a decade to finish. Indonesia is not the first country in Southeast Asia to relocate an overpopulated capital, with both Malaysia and Myanmar moving their administrative centers in the 2000s.
Australia and the Netherlands launched fresh legal proceedings against Russia on Monday over the 2014 downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, saying Moscow's invasion of Ukraine called for urgent accountability. The joint action was filed with the UN's civil aviation body, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and comes over 2 weeks into the war in Ukraine. The two countries hope the ICAO will determine that Russia violated international conventions by firing a missile on a civilian aircraft. I quote, Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine and the escalation of its aggression underscores the need to continue our enduring efforts to hold Russia to account, according to Australian government in a statement. Dutch Foreign Minister Wopke Hoekstra echoed the pressing need for action, adding, we cannot and will not allow the death of 298 people, including 196 Dutch nationals, to go unanswered. Ill-fated flight MH17 was shot down over war-torn Ukraine on July 17, 2004, killing everyone on board. International investigators say it was downed by a surface-to-air missile originally brought from a Russian military base as it flew over eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region held by pro-Moscow separatists. Russia denies any responsibility for the mid-air destruction. 4 men have been charged in the Netherlands over the plane's downing and are being tried near Schiphol Airport, where the flight took off from. The suspects, Russian nationals Igor Verkin, Sergei Dubinsky, and Oleg Polatov, and Ukrainian citizen Leonid Charchenko, have all refused to attend the trial in the Netherlands.
In other news, clutching pails, tubs, and buckets, residents of Myanmar's bustling commercial capital Yangon queue for water as rolling power outages aggravate the economic misery sparked by last year's military coup. Last week, the junta announced the country's already patchy power supply would be further reduced for 7 days, blaming rising gas prices and attacks by anti-coup fighters on infrastructure. Take a look.
ခုနလိုမီးပြက်တာလောက်ကငါတို့ကခုနလိုမီးသွေးတွေပါညာနဲ့ချက်လို့ရတယ်ကွာအခုကျတော့ဟိုဟာဖြစ်တော့ရေမရလည်းမရအောင်ဘာမှလုပ်လို့မရတော့ဘူးလေရေမရလို့မီးတာတော့လည်းဘာလို့ချက်မှာဘာမှချက်လို့မရဘူးလေအဲ့လိုမျိုးပေါ့မဟာမြိုင်အိမ်ယာနောက်တော့ဟိုဘက်ချမ်းတော့တော်ဝင်အိမ်ယာပေါ့နှစ်ခုမှာကလည်းသူကအိမ်အောင်စုကအားလုံးက3000ကျော်လောက်ရှိတယ်ဗျရှိတော့အဲ့ဒီအတွက်ကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဟိုပေါ့ကားနှစ်စီးနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒါနေ့စဉ်ပေါ့လေတရက်ကို9ချိန်ကားတစ်စီး9ချိန်လုံးနဲ့10ချိန်ပေါ့ကျွန်တော်ရေကာလန်ခမ်းမကြီး3000ခွဲလောက်ကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဒါနေ့စဉ်လာလူပေးနေပါတယ်ဗျ
Power outages are common in Myanmar due to a creaky and outdated electricity grid, with demand regularly outstripping supply during the sweltering summer months. Last July, Yangon's power supplier warned customers their electricity supplies could be disrupted if they continue refusing to pay their bills as part of a boycott that has hit junta coffers. Thousands of civil servants have walked out in protest against the regime, leaving schools, universities, and hospitals empty, and the State Administration Council, as the junta calls itself, struggling to issue bills or collect taxes.
Israel's Ministry of Health said on Wednesday it had recorded 2 cases of a new COVID variant, but which officials said they were not unduly worried about. The strains, combining 2 sub-variants of the Omicron version of the COVID-19 virus, dubbed BA.1 and BA.2, was recorded during the PCR test on 2 passengers arriving at Israel's Ben Gurion Airport. I quote, "This variant is still unknown around the world," according to the ministry. I quote, "The 2 cases of the combined strain, which have been discovered so far, suffered from mild symptoms of fever, headaches, and muscle dystrophy, and do not require a special medical response," it added. Israel's pandemic response chief Salman Zarqa played down the risk. I quote, "The phenomenon of combined variants is well known," Zarqa told Army Radio. "At this stage, we are not worried about it leading to serious cases," end of quote. More than 4 million people out of Israel's population of 9.2 million have received 3 coronavirus vaccine shots. A total of almost 1.4 million cases of COVID infection, including 8,244 deaths, have been officially recorded in the country. Last month, Israel announced that unvaccinated tourists would be allowed to enter as part of an easing of COVID restrictions.
After a consistent decrease in the number of new COVID-19 cases globally since the end of January this year, last week saw a rise of 8%, the World Health Organization, or WHO, warned on Wednesday. More than 11 million new cases and just over 43,000 new deaths were reported between 7th and 13th of March, with over 455 million confirmed cases and over 6 million deaths from the coronavirus overall. Regionally, the Western Pacific saw the highest increase in the new weekly cases of 29%, followed by Africa at 12%. But infections dropped by 20% or more in the Eastern Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, and the Americas. The highest numbers of COVID cases were reported in the Republic of Korea, with more than 2.1 million infections, up 44%, followed by Vietnam and Germany. The highest death toll over the past week was reported in the United States, where more than 9,000 people died, a 13% decrease from the previous 7-day period. Russia reported more than 4,500 new deaths from coronavirus, which is a 15% decrease, while Brazil confirmed more than 3,300 COVID fatalities, also down 15%. And the news continues here in ASEAN in Focus. We will be back right after this.
Karapatan natin lahat na iboto ang karapat-dapat! Lahat ng Pilipino pwedeng bumoto!
Kung rehistrado ka.
Ha?
Ang lahat ng Pilipinong rehistrado lamang ang maaaring bumoto. 1 taon ang ibinibigay ng Commission on Elections para magparehistro ang mga Pilipinong boboto sa darating na eleksyon. Kailangan gawin ito para maiwasan ang tinatawag na flying voters. Teka, lahat ba kayo nagparehistro na?
Opo! Rehistrado na kami lahat!
Bakit tahimik ka? Hindi ka nakapagrehistro, no?
Nakakalimutan ko eh.
Ay, hindi ka pwedeng bumoto. Mabuti pa, bumili ka na lang ng balot.
Pagka kami pa bumili ng balot, pwede na kami bumoto.
Hindi, pero mabubusog ka. Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa new era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back to the program. Vietnam will build the third oil refinery plant to meet local consumption demand, Deputy Prime Minister Lee Van-Tan told legislators on Wednesday. The plant is set to be built in the southern province of Vung Tau with a designed capacity of 10 million M3 per annum. The government tasked the Vietnam Oil and Gas Group to drop the investment project, and investment procedures are expected to be completed by this October, Lee added. Lee emphasized the need to further increase crude exploitation capacity as the currently exploited crude oil only meets 50% of the raw materials for domestic petroleum production. Vietnam put into operation the first oil refinery plant in 2009 and the second in 2018, but both plants only meet around 70% of domestic demand. The Nghi Son plant, the largest at present that supplies 1/3 of the country's demand, has cut production output to 80% or even to 55% at some point due to financial problems.
Going back to the Philippines, an additional 200 peso per month subsidy has been proposed to help beneficiaries of the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program for peace cope with the rising fuel prices. Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III proposed the retention of excise taxes on the fuel and use the money to be collected to extend subsidies to households belonging to the bottom 50% of the society, as well as the drivers and operators of public utility vehicles or PUVs, and farmers and fisherfolk. Dominguez said estimated revenue losses from excise tax suspension are around 105.9 billion pesos in 2022, 114.4 billion pesos in 2023, and 123.6 billion pesos in 2024. Dominguez said they expect to collect 131.4 billion pesos from excise taxes and 15.8 billion pesos from value-added tax, or a total of 147.2 billion pesos for this year. He said this amount has been allocated under this year's national budget to finance various expenses such as infrastructure and socio-economic programs, as well as provide financing for salaries of state workers. Dominguez said if the country continues to spend the same amount of money, we will have to borrow more money and the amount of debt that will bring up our debt to the GDP ratio to about 61.4%. Economic managers have been prudent in managing the government finances even during the pandemic, noting that while expenses have increased, the proportion of debt vis-a-vis economy's output has remained manageable and sustainable.
France TotalEnergies said Wednesday that it would not seek financial compensation for its withdrawal from Myanmar over concerns about human rights abuses since a coup last year. The French energy giant and U.S. partner Chevron announced in January that they would pull out of the Yadana gas field, with TotalEnergies citing the worsening situation for human rights and the rule of law. I quote, "In light of the exceptional situation, TotalEnergies has chosen to withdraw from Myanmar without seeking any financial compensation for its assets." End of quote, according to the company in a statement. The field in the Andaman Sea provides electricity to Myanmar and neighboring Thailand. TotalEnergies had been under pressure from human rights groups to cut its financial links to the junta since the army seized power from a civilian government in February 2021. Human Rights Watch says natural gas projects are Myanmar's single largest source of foreign currency revenue, generating more than $1 billion every year. TotalEnergies said its withdrawal from Yadana and the MGTC pipeline would take effect on July 20. The company's 31.4% stake in the Yadana gas field was the biggest in a consortium that included Chevron, Thai firm PTTEP, and Myanmar's army-controlled MOGE.
And that's the latest news in the Southeast Asian nation. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. And thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. I'm Esther Adanga from Thailand Bureau.
And I'm Gila Pablo. And we live in interesting times.